Okay, as you know, we have an evaluation tomorrow. We had just asked, we have a paper that's due tomorrow. Just wanted to ask how it's going, and do we have a decisive or conclusive answer for that?
Still working on it.
Okay, still working on it. Okay, one of the things that we look at when it comes to genetics, okay, how do you know what an organism might have for a genotype? Because you can't look at a genotype and say, I know for certain that this animal has this set of genes, or alleles, if you want to look at it in that fashion, okay? So for those of you maybe writing it down or maybe can't see that are tuning in later, we just look for a villain name. If you've, oh shoot, is it Resident Evil? Is that what it's called? The Umbrella Corporation, I think it comes from that movie franchise, okay, is in the process of selling genetically modified grasshoppers. So maybe a geneticist needs to determine, is homozygous dominant or a hybrid for wing length present in one of the parents? And this parent is one that, okay, we can see that this grasshopper has long wings, and that's what we want. But how can we do this, okay? In other words, it's stating, illustrate, how can you determine this? What genotype this parent has? Again, because you can't just look at an organism and say, this is the alleles or genes that it has. So what it goes on to state then is this parent, it's got the long wings, okay? And we know that, and I chose to use S's for these instead of L's because then it's just maybe a little easier to tell the difference. You can use L's. I mean, there's nothing wrong with that, okay? But I just chose to use S's, okay? So as we can see that S with no line means that's probably capital S. That's going to be dominant, okay? Is dominant over short wings. So when you see this, then we know that this is the recessive trait because it has a line over the top. Okay, is dominant over short wings. All right. Illustrate, how can we tell this parent that we're looking at that has long wings, what would that mean? Okay, this is long, and then that is short. Okay, how can we determine the genotype of that parent? And as one of your vocab terms, it's called a test cross. You would have to do what, maybe it wasn't one of your vocab. Okay, well, now we're just going to tell you, you would perform what we call a test cross. Because if this parent, and does this say anything about codominance? No. Does this say anything about incomplete dominance? No, it does not. So we would have to presume that if that capital S is present, those wings are going to be what? They're going to be long. So we know that for sure that allele is in there. Okay? So does that parent still have long wings? Yes, it does. Does that parent still have long wings? But can you tell by looking at this what the genotype is? We see that the animal's got long wings. That's the phenotype. We can see that it's got long wings, but can you see the alleles from looking at the animal? No, you cannot. What is the only way that you can determine that I know for sure this organism could have short wings? And think about this with peas. That's the best way to look at that, I think. We know that if that dominant trait is present, what color are these pea plants? Those are going to be yellow. What is the only way that you can have green colored peas in the pod? 2 lowercase yellows, or Y's, sorry. So when we do this process of what we call a test cross, okay, and that is, these kind of look like funny S's, okay? So how can we determine, if we have a short winged grasshopper, that's how we would determine the genotype of whatever this parent is. Then we can see that it's either homozygous dominant or it's a heterozygous trait. Okay? So what we would do then is okay. In human terms, we could do something very similar. Okay? What happens, what would be two, this is one of your problems that you had done as well. What are 2 alleles for someone who has brown eyes? Because if that's dominant over blue, which it is, this is very similar to that problem there. We're just using grasshoppers instead of eye color. Okay? What is the only way that an offspring or a child, kid, however you want to talk about that, what's the only way that you can have blue eyes? 2 lowercase b's. Okay? So the same concept would apply, because you can look at a parent and say, well, they've got brown eyes. So I bet that every time that parent decides, that potential parent has kids, that they're going to have brown eyes. Who knows someone who's got siblings who have both brown eyes and blue eyes? Do you know anybody like that? Okay? So again, that would be a fairly similar process with this, because when you illustrate this, okay, so if we do this cross on the bottom, we see we got 2 capital S's, 2 lowercase s's. Okay, so 100% of the time, what's going to happen if that parent is homozygous dominant for these long wings? What's the offspring going to have? They're also going to have long wings, 100% of the time. But how would you know that, though? But you're right, but how would you know that? Because what is present in this parent? 2 capital S's, so that must mean that parent was homozygous dominant. So if you did this cross then, are we going to come up with 75%, 50%, 20%? With the top one now. So, and if we don't know, let's just go ahead and do the cross. Okay, so we have this on the left, and then we got these on the right. Okay, so then we've got a capital S, a lowercase s, capital S, lowercase s, and then, so what would the percentage be if that parent was heterozygous then? Again, we're trying to determine, is it homozygous or if it's a hybrid. So the hybrid means it's got one of each, or heterozygous. So this is how you could determine what the genotype of that parent is. You have to use a known genotype, and that is homozygous recessive. That's the only way you can tell.
But how do you know which one it would be then?
You'd have to look at the results then.
But there's 2 results.
I'm sorry, there's 2 what?
Results, like one is a hybrid and one is.
Right. So what you would say then is maybe the question would go on to state, that's where we wanted to leave off with this. Okay, so illustrate how this can be determined. So part 2 of this might say, and there were 50% offspring with short wings. What was the parent's genotype? Okay. So we're going back to this here. What we're trying to test, what was one of the parents' genotype? Because we already know this one. This is your test cross. Okay? Every time you do that, it has to be homozygous recessive, because that's the only one that you can tell, because both of these have long wings. So then, and there were 50% offspring with short wings. What was the parent's genotype? So was it parent 1 here or parent 2 that would be in this problem? Why are you correct? Because it showed 50% of the time that came up with short wings. So we wanted to make you think a little bit on how to decipher this. Okay? Because that's our job, to make you critical thinkers. All right. Questions on this? So front row, left side. So we went across the middle, sorry. Front row, right side. Okay, front row, or middle row, right side. The rest of the middle row. And then the rest of the middle row, left side. Back. Okay, all right. So we have about 35 minutes. You said you're not done with those papers. If you're done, then it's one less thing to have to worry about. If you're not done, you have time to work on these. Yes. Okay, just a moment. Okay, so barring no questions, the rest of the time will then be yours to ask questions on this individually, or work on your papers that are due tomorrow, problem quiz, and 2-3 problems at the most, because we can't put 4 dihybrid crosses on there. You'll just run out of time. Okay, so it could be codominant, could be incomplete dominant, could be complete dominance. Okay, and that's what this is. This is a complete dominant cross. So just be aware of what could be on there. We'll catch up to you next time.